Hi, guys. Shawn and I have some exciting news. We have created official Twitter and Instagram accounts for the Oh Mr. Sheffield podcast. It is at Oh Mr. Chef Pod on both platforms, and that is Oh Mr. Chef with two F's. So Oh Mr. Chef Pod. Check it out. Follow us. It's going to have all the latest and greatest from us about this show, and we hope you like it.
Now enjoy the episode.
The Flushing girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Welcome back to another episode of Oh, Mr. Sheffield, a podcast where we discuss the hit 90s sitcom The Nanny, starring Fran Drescher. I am Shawn Pasquale, here with
Toria Sheffield.
That's right, no relation to the titular Mr. Sheffield. She is not cool enough to be that rich. And this week, we are talking about episode 10. This is also episode 10 of our podcast. So yay, we made it to episode 10. What is a 10-year anniversary gift? Is it like silver?
Let me Google.
Like bronze?
10-year
It's like the bronze. Anyway, while she looks that up, this episode is called The Nanny-in-Law. And I love this episode for many, many reasons. But the short summary is this is the episode where Mr. Sheffield's childhood nanny comes to visit the household. And Fran gets very nervous that she's not a traditional enough nanny because the nanny that comes to visit, played by the always hilarious and incomparable Cloris Leachman, is a very traditional, severe kind of woman.
Mm-hmm. Also, 10-year anniversary is 10. FYI.
Ooh, it's our tin episode.
Well, I don't even know what do we even get for tin?
Tinfoil, baby. I'm gonna send you a big tinfoil ball.
we are recording in our tinfoil hats, but that isn't uwas for us. Also, Cloris Leachman just died in January.
I know.
And she, I read this, was nominated. Oh no, she won 8 primetime Emmys. Was nominated 22 times, making her the most nominated, and along with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, the most awarded actress in Emmy history.
I worked with Cloris Leachman. I was very lucky. She came and she did a guest spot on this show, Franklin and Bash, that I worked on. It was like Mark Paul Gosselaar and Breckenmeyer played like attorneys, and it was like an hour-long comedy basically. And Cloris Leachman, we did an episode that was like, again, classic tropey. We did like a haunted Halloween episode where the attorneys had to go investigate this. They got hired by this person who owned this house that was supposedly haunted, and then they're trying to prove whether or not it's really haunted or not. And then Cloris Leachman played this like old Romani woman, like fortune teller type lady. And was hilarious. Like did the same accent that she's doing in this episode, and was just like so funny and like so spry. And so I have like an affinity for her just because I got to meet her personally, and she was dope.
Yeah. Well, and so she plays Nanny Mueller in this episode, and it's so weird because she has this very thick German accent as Nanny Mueller, and like the second she walked in the door, I knew she was going to have an accent.
Of course.
Don't know why. But so the
accent's very Frau Brucher, you know? I mean,
yeah.
It's like, that's what she's doing. She's doing Frau Brucher from Young Frank. You know, it's
yes.
Would you like some cocoa? No, I'm good. Are you sure? How about the hot tea?
Yes. And so, but the interesting thing right off the bat from this episode is, we set up that she's coming to visit, and Mr. Sheffield's like very nervous, and then we also set up that we find out that Niles has known Mr. Sheffield since he was a baby.
Okay, I want to get into that. There's a lot to unpack there. I guess I should real quickly, though, I forgot to mention this episode was co-written by Dennis Drake and Eve Alhert. They went on to write Legally Blonde too. And then it was directed by this guy, Paul Miller, who did a whole bunch of stuff in like the 90s, a bunch of TV and sitcoms. And he did the Ben Stiller show and Alf. And then for the last, I want to say, decade, he directed every single awards show on the face of the earth. and
wow.
Saturday Night Live Christmas specials every year. And so he really shifted into like live
Wow.
TV kind of stuff. Yeah, so that's who made this episode.
Mhm.
Let's dive in. And that was my first note as well, which was, how is it possible that Niles remembers Mr. Sheffield's first word? Is he supposed to be 80 years old? That was what I wrote in my notes.
So I had the same thing. And I was like, and these actors are only 10 years apart. But then it's clarified later in the episode that he was the butler's son. So clearly his father was the butler in Mr. Sheffield's household when Mr. Sheffield was growing up. And as the butler's son, he must have lived in the household and just sort of been a member of the staff sort of his entire life, which is very sad and odd when you think about it. But that's how it used to, that's how it used to be. But this would have been in like the 60s. So when I say this is how it used to be, I'm talking at like the turn of the century and before. But hey, I guess they were a very traditional household.
So Niles is remembering Mr. Sheffield's first word as like he was a child growing up with Mr. Sheffield.
Yes, like still very much the help,
like a teenager.
Like he would have been 10. Yeah, he would have been 12 years old and the butler's son.
Because then another thing that we reveal in this episode is that he has a relationship with Cloris Leachman's nanny.
with Nanny Bueller, played by
Nanny
Cloris.
Bueller. Yeah.
We find,
which I guess would imply that he was 15, 16, having a relation. That would be like if Fran had a relationship with Brighton.
I mean, it wouldn't be quite that bad, but it would have been bad. Because yes, she was like, they established that, so basically, so Franny Mueller comes, she's this very severe woman. She instantly makes Fran feel a little inadequate. And then we find out that, I think, Niles is bringing Nanny Mueller's bags up to her room. And she's like, oh, thank you, Niles. Like, and then he's like, so you remember me? And she's like, how could I have forgotten? And we find out that they had this very gross, like sexual relationship when, he must have been a teenager and she must have been about 30. And that like, clearly she was like his first sexual experience and awakening. And they're still very much, that charge is still there between them, which was unexpected, honestly.
Very unexpected. And I can only assume that partially it had to be motivated by the fact that they have made multiple gay jokes about him, but haven't shown him in any kind of relationship at all. So I wonder if this was them being like, oh, we got to get an episode in there where we make it clear he's like a straight man.
I don't even think it was that calculated. Like, I think that the series was written at a time when, unfortunately, you assumed people were straight unless otherwise clarified. And so they wouldn't have thought, oh, we should clarify that about Niles. They also already made that Victoria's Secret joke about him. I think they just thought it would be like a funny thing to do, even though, again, we're like, ew, that's like he was abused. He was
abused. He was groomed by this woman.
But so, like the central conflict of this episode is that Nanny Mueller is very disapproving of Fran as a nanny. She is like, Fran has no formal training. She's clearly much too sort of like lenient on the children. The stuff that she allows to go on, Nanny Mueller never would have allowed to go on in her household. We also established that
she also doesn't wear a maid's outfit. They established that not only should she be wearing a maid's outfit, but that like we also meet other maids that I guess Fran knows that are all wearing maids outfits. And so so it's like it is highlighted in this episode that it's very unusual that Fran is like not wearing some kind of uniform.
And that Fran eats with the family. Nanny Mueller is also very disapproving of that. And basically, Fran at one point goes in to talk to Mr. Sheffield and is like, she's kind of encroaching on my turf. Like she's trying to like undermine me with your kids. And Mr. Sheffield dismisses her and is sort of like, oh no, in fact, maybe you could learn a thing or two from her. She's a very experienced woman. And that's actually when we have that weird scene where we see Fran at a park while Gracie's clearly off playing, and she's sitting around all with these other nannies who she clearly knows, even though we had never established that this was like a part of her life or routine before.
No, 10 episodes in, we've never even established that she knows other nannies, let alone that she's friendly with them enough that she's unloading all of her problems onto them. Well, it's such a weird scene.
But I also think it is very accurate because it is true that a lot of times, especially in places like New York, when a lot of families hire nannies, those women, often women, they take the kids to the playground and they're mostly talking to other nannies. They're not talking to other moms.
No, I mean, it makes sense. And it's interesting that they haven't used it more, I guess, is really, you go like, oh yeah, why haven't they done more of this?
Yes. But the other nannies are all like, much more traditional, typical seeming nannies than Fran. And basically while she's trying to complain about this, the women all sort of not shake their heads knowingly and go, never come between a man and his nanny. Like, you will lose. And there's very much the like nanny as mother parallel throughout this whole episode.
Absolutely.
It's also called like nanny in law, which brings up this whole other thing that is like a running gag, which is like basically that rich kids who have nannies like really don't know their parents, because Cece also, talks so lovingly about her childhood nanny. And, Mr. Sheffield's talking about Nanny Mueller. And at one point, Fran goes, like, what were your parents doing? And both Cece and Mr. Sheffield think, and they go, I have no idea.
Yeah. Their parents were just not involved in their lives, which is a running theme in the show. And one of the things that Fran, fixes in this series is that like she really drives home the fact that like he has to be there for the kids and they have to spend more time together as a family, and that he has to be involved in their lives. They also name, this is the first time we learn that Cece's sister is named BB and her sister is named Dee Dee and her mother is named BB. Mm-hmm. And her nanny was named Bobo. Which I don't even get what the joke's supposed to be there, except that it's just like another 2-syllable name, I guess.
It's just silly. It's just silliness. But it's true.
She had Nanny Bobo.
Nanny Bobo. And a lot of wealthy women, they do have, that is a trope of that culture where it's like your name is like Muffin, Gigi,
Buffy.
Buffy is literally a common sort of waspy nickname.
Tori.
No.
This episode also solidified Maggie is 14 years old. She is supposed to be a 14-year-old girl, which I found very odd. I thought she was like 16.
Yeah, they've mentioned her as 14 before, but for some reason I've assumed they had aged her up. But no, she's still 14.
I don't know. There's a lot of like boy dating relationship stuff for 14, isn't there?
I agree. Maybe that's some families. Maybe we're overprotective.
I mean, like I didn't start getting interested in girls until about 13, 14. And like, I feel like I wasn't at the point where I was like dating though. You know what I mean? I just was like, oh, girls exist, I guess.
Well, and little Jimmy Marston seems like he's at least 18.
46 years old.
No, I mean, he seems much too old for a 14-year-old. He would be, I think in this world, he's got to be at least 17 or 18 because he's in New York trying to act and he has all these part-time jobs.
Yes. And it's like, don't you go to school? And it's like, so he must be 17, 18. And then it's like, why are they okay with him dating a 14-year-old girl and encouraging it? It's all very odd. I guess these were all okay things in 1994.
Maybe we'll get one day a real like long-term producer of the show on, and maybe we'll find out
a lot of questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is the stuff we'll ask them about.
I would love to get I feel like we could probably get a producer of this show.
And just really iron out the detail of
what they were thinking.
Maggie Eddie plotline. Back to the episode.
Yeah.
Fran's way of reacting to all of this pressure that like I'm not a proper nanny is to basically do a 180. And she shows up the next day at breakfast in a full nanny uniform.
Yeah.
She insists on taking her breakfast in the other room, even though they're like, no, like, please join us, please join us. She's like, no, like I'm a proper nanny. And it's almost like she's doing this to prove a point rather than to act, it's not that she's actually been reformed or is trying to quote, do it the right way.
Yeah. She's 100% doing everything out of spite.
Yeah.
Like it's completely spiteful. She puts on the most fuddy-duddy outfit. She's like very cold when she comes in. She's very removed. And she's, what's weird is, I guess it makes sense because it's like, she's not really doing it to spite the other nanny. She's doing it to sort of like you said, like teach Mr. Sheffield a lesson, like to be like, here, this is the world that you would live in if I was the way that this nanny is that you're so pleased with.
Exactly.
And it is awkward. Everyone in the kid, everyone at the dinner table like responds to it like as like this is weird. And but ultimately effective because
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Well, literally, Mr. Sheffield breaks after literally like a day. Then it cuts to that night. Fran is sitting in the kitchen, like knitting something or doing something very like conventionally nanny and like sort of singing like, woe is me. And he comes down the stairs in his pajamas and he's like, Miss Fine, like, stop wearing that ridiculous outfit. Like, stop it. I like the way you are. Yeah. Which is almost very similar to that country club debutante episode, like a similar arc where he's like, if I wanted a conventional nanny, I would have hired a conventional nanny. I want you.
Right.
And he basically says that like he will talk to Nanny Mueller the next day and he will ask her to leave, at which point they hear a squeal from upstairs.
This was also such a weird.
So weird. Well, so it's basically they're like, wait, is that Nanny Mueller? And they're like, and Niles? They run into the butler's pantry as Niles and Nanny Mueller come down the stairs. And I wrote, they're being so loud for two people trying to disagree.
Dude, I wrote the same note. I wrote, why are they running around the kitchen laughing and screaming? I wrote, my note was weirdly aggressive romance and bold.
Yes, they're like, literally about to like have each other on the kitchen counter kind of thing.
And it's like, why? It's not their house. And it also seemed very out of character for these two very professional people to be like, oh, everyone's asleep, I guess we can fuck in the kitchen now. Like, what?
The whole thing is just gross just because just feels gross. But it's funny because Mr. Sheffield feels the exact same way. He's basically like, oh my God, I never want to think about Nanny Mueller, having sex. And then, Fran is like, yeah, it's like her line is literally, yeah, it's like imagining your parents having sex. Thank God mine never did. And this leads to, the big climactic moment. It's the next morning at breakfast again. And Fran walks in and she's wearing her normal clothes and she sits down at breakfast just like she's a member of the family as always. And Nanny Mueller kind of makes a dig at her and is like, oh, I see you're back to your old ways. I also quickly have a note that says, what juice are they drinking? Because did you notice they all have what looks like Hawaiian punch? It doesn't look like any juice that you would drink for breakfast.
It looks like just gross Hawaiian punch that like the set deck was like, well, we got Hawaiian punch. It's really what it looks like.
It doesn't even look like cranberry juice. It's straight up Hawaiian punch.
Yeah, it probably is. It's literally probably from craft services table. They were like, oh, just fill their glasses up with Hawaiian punch.
But so anyway, Miss Nanny Mueller makes a side comment at Fran, at which point you think Mr. Sheffield is going to say, Nanny Mueller, you've actually outstayed your welcome. Oh, and I guess we should establish the fact that when they're talking this out the night before, Mr. Sheffield and Fran, she's like, well, if this is getting to be too much and she's kind of encroaching too much on our lives, just ask her to leave. And he's like, I could never, like, she raised me. I'd feel too guilty. But he resolves that he says he will do it, even though he feels bad about it. But so when actually faced with the moment the next day at breakfast, he like takes a deep breath and then is like, I'm running late for tennis, and runs out.
And Fran goes, wait, you forgot your balls. And she holds up a can of tennis balls. And I wrote, whoa, balls. Cause that's like a pretty racy joke to get away with it on a primetime show. But I guess because she had the can, you're allowed to do that.
I bet you like the censors over at ABC were literally standards and practices were like, you got to at least be holding tennis balls.
This episode was I had more fun with this episode than the last one, but it was another episode where I felt like even as you pointed out, they kind of already did this theme, right? That like she's good just the way she is. I guess the twist on it in this one is that like, well, her modern ways are better than like old timey ways.
Well, I actually thought that once the episode fully resolved itself, it kind of swung me back over to liking it. Because I first had that same thought as you had. But then what happens in that scene is once Mr. Sheffield like basically, pussies out and runs away, Fran is the one that stands up and is like, listen, like, I'm sorry. I know you were the nanny back in the day, but I'm the nanny now, and these are my kids, and they're going to be raised like my way. And then we have this really unexpected moment where instead of Nanny Mueller, who this entire episode has been like so like tough and hardened and cold, she really softens and she's like, yes, like you say they're your kids and you feel like they're your kids, but they're not your kids. And like eventually they're going to grow up and you're going to have to move on to another family and another family. And like you're going to love all of those kids because you won't be able to help yourself. And she's like, and then at the end of your life, you're going to find yourself with a lifetime worth of love to give and nobody to take it. Yeah. And it was like literally the
it's
audience.
A beautiful moment. Yeah.
Yeah. It was such a good moment. Like the audience is like, aw. Yeah. And like Fran is also like, clearly moved. I was literally moved by this. But so this completely reframes this previously sort of villainous character of Nanny Mueller. And Fran is instantly like, oh my God, I completely misunderstood you. Yeah. And they kind of have this moment where like Fran takes her in for a hug, at which point Mr. Sheffield comes barreling in and he's like, I actually did have something to say. Like, you need to leave, Nanny Mueller. And Fran like almost slaps him and he's like, don't talk to your nanny that way. Yeah. And basically like completely, she does a complete 180 on Nanny Mueller.
I think what this is also kind of laying groundwork for which makes sense springboarding off of the last episode, which is the idea that like, aside from whatever feelings or attraction she has to Mr. Sheffield, we know that she loves these children. And now it's sort of laying the groundwork for like, if you don't become a permanent part of their lives in like a larger sense, then you will eventually have to move on. And they're not going to need a nanny forever. And so it's an interesting bit of little groundwork to sort of lay for Fran that they don't like dig into it too hard here, but it is definitely food for thought as she grows like closer to this family and the kids start to get older, and I know that eventually they do get married. So spoilers, I guess, but like it's interesting to me that they're already kind of like giving good reason for why she would want to pursue this, outside of like, that he's like rich.
Do we want to move on to our segments? I mean, I feel like that's kind of the whole episode.
Yeah, that's the episode. Let's do segments. And now segments.
So segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
We can move on to our segments.
And now segments.
Segments with Shawn and Toria. Best line moments. I already flagged the one where I liked where Fran was like, it's like you're thinking about your parents having sex. Thank God mine never did. But I really liked when Fran comes down the stairs and comes into breakfast and she's in that full nanny uniform and curtsies and takes her breakfast in another room. Or maybe it was dinner because Cece's there. And Cece goes, wow, Nanny Mueller, it's incredible what you've done with Miss Fine. And Nanny Mueller says, that's nothing. I had a schnauzer that gave me more trouble.
I liked the line. I think my favorite line was Maxwell is worried about Nanny Mueller and they're like, they're like trying to come up with ideas. And he says, it's the line you were talking about earlier where he was like, oh, she raised me for heaven's sakes. I feel guilty. I can't just kick her out. And Fran goes, I wouldn't understand guilt. My people invented it. But we made up for it with the Salk vaccine and Streisand.
Yes, that was a great line.
I love that the Jews made up for guilt with the Salk vaccine and Barbara Streisand.
And actually, you know what? That jumps ahead to the trivia a little bit, just because I didn't know what the Salk vaccine was. So I Googled it, and it was the polio vaccine developed by Jonas Salk in the 1950s. Yeah. I had no idea.
Yeah, we cured polio, baby. Look at us go.
And there was actually no Yiddish in this episode. But so I looked up the Yiddish term for jealousy because I think a lot of what Nanny Mueller's motivation was in this episode was feeling like what was hers has been taken by somebody else. And so that is mikna. It's spelled M-K-N-A. Mikna. And then for who's the Fran, who's the Cece, I think I was the Cece because I had nannies.
You had nannies?
Yes, but it was not like...
Are you guys rich?
No, it was.
I feel like that's what someone with a nanny would say. Though.
Well, this has been great. This has been, this was not one of my favorites. It felt a little too like hammy or contrived, or they needed a plot line and someone churned out the plot line, and even though go on.
It was like a common thing that I think you see happen in sitcoms, even today, is when you get like a really solid guest star, like oftentimes like the episode will just revolve around like giving that guest star a lot of fun stuff to do. And this episode was definitely all about Cloris Leachman getting to like chew scenery. And everyone else was just kind of like a bystander. It was like, and she was great and it was very enjoyable. All of those scenes were very enjoyable, but as a whole, it very much felt like, oh, this was like the Cloris Leachman episode,
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly it. And I bet most people who remember this episode remember it as such.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
I
think that's it. Yeah, I think we've gone and done it. By Jove, I think we've done it, old man. He calls him old man a lot, and I really want to start using old man more for like my friends.
Okay, old man.
Good job, old man. Good job, old boy. Old boy. I mean, wait until Elizabeth gets home today. I'm going to be like, good to see you, old boy. If you are enjoying all of this nonsense and you're liking rewatching The Nanny alongside with us, please leave a comment, share it on social media, tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell your parents. Penn and Teller, and then also go to anchor.fm/the Nanny Pod, where you can check out our show on the page where it's hosted, and you can leave us a little message, and then we'll play them on the show. I've only just started telling people about this now, and I don't know if I've given anyone time to do it, so it might be a while before we get some results. And if no one calls, I'm going to just use funny voices and leave us messages so that it seems like people are listening to us.
Yeah. I'll definitely get at least 2 cousins to call.
Yeah. Be like, Mom, leave a message for me, please.
All right. Well, again, thank you guys as always.
If you want to find me, do it on Twitter. And if you want to find Toria, do it on Instagram at Toria Sheffy with 2 F's and a Y.
Yeah. Also, you said it like DeWitter instead of Twitter.
Yeah, I'm on DeWitter. I don't like Twitter. I'm against it. Jack sucks. I like DeWitter.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been another excellent episode, and we cannot wait to see you next week.
All right. Goodbye.
The Flashing Girl from Flushing. The Nanny
named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
I go, Miss Fine.